probably this one too. Okay. And we're going to be reminded to replace the lamp the whole time, right? So my understanding is a group of you and maybe some others, just spent a nice time this semester discussing conceptions of divinity, yeah? I was fortunate to be part of one of those sessions. And now you're embarking on a new little journey, the Nectar devotion journey. Yeah. I don't know what kind of background you've been provided, but I'll say a few things. And then we'll get started. When Srila Prabhupada, the ISKCON, before it was founded, was living in Vrindavan, he had completed his family life. He turned his family business over to his sons, and he went to Vrindavan to dedicate himself to an instruction that he had received from his spiritual master, which was to take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the English-speaking parts of the world. Because Prabhupada had college education and he was fluent in English, and Bhaktisiddhanta gave him that instruction the very first time they met. So where he lived when he was in Vrindavan, the second place where he lived, was in the courtyard. I don't know if any of you have been there, but in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple. There's two little side rooms, and with a friend of his, the Goswami of the Radharaman temple, who had a friendship with the Goswami of the Radha Damodar temple, those two rooms were given to Prabhupada to stay in. And right outside his window of the room where he did his cooking and eating his meals, and over there is where he rested and did his translation work. Looking out the window when he was taking his meals, he could see the samadhi of Rupa Goswami, both the samadhi and Bhajan Gutir. Now, Rupa Goswami, amongst all the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who were very elevated, perfected personalities, Rupa Goswami was foremost. There's details, but time doesn't permit. He was empowered to understand everything that Lord Chaitanya wrote or said. He gave teachings to him for some time, and personal, he's in Dashashramedha Ghat in Benares, and instructed him to write, expand these teachings in the form of literature. So the teachings were the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada was given the service, the assignment of take the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to the English-speaking parts of the world. And so the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. You can say it conversely. The teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. There is no difference. And those teachings he passed on to Rupa Goswami, who then wrote literature. And foremost, most outstanding of all this literature is this one. So the Sanskrit title, because the book was written in Sanskrit, Bhakti-rasamrita-sindhu. It is Sindhu, an ocean of the Amrita of Bhakti, the nectar of devotion. So Prabhupada made a summary study, Nectar of Devotion, to fulfill the instruction of his spiritual master to give the teachings of Lord Chaitanya on the science of bhakti to the Western world, the English-speaking parts of the world. So he took a break from the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam to write such literature, the Nectar of Devotion. It was published in 1970, because I remember when it first came out, we had a morning class in Srimad Bhagavatam, an evening class in Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada asked us to have a third class every day, class in Nectar Devotion, every day. Such an important literature. So I'm going to, this little background of its magnitude, its importance for the world, from the ISKCON's founder Acharya perspective and his spiritual master's perspective. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya given to Rupa Goswami, empowered to write it. So I'm going to go through, this is chapter 1, and I'm going to go through kind of high level. Let's say this, I'm going to leave out half of the detail, because there's lots of detail, and a little disclaimer, or, you know, an apology, I guess. There are two things. Prabhupada taught us that on spiritual topics, when you speak something, you need to have some scriptural authority to support that something. So our acharyas did that. Jiva Goswami did that, Rupa Goswami. They would make statements, and then they would say, this is the scripture from which this statement is derived. So there's a little of the scriptural reference, and there's a little bit of Sanskrit terminology that's probably new to you, It's not so important. I'll make it, because I don't know Sanskrit, I'm learning, some terms. But what's important is the meaning. So as we go along, I'll say a few terms that you may not be so familiar with, that's okay. The emphasis goes to what the essence, because that's how I learned. What do I know? Sanskrit. So it's the essence. So that's the emphasis. But the terminology will be there, some. 50% not there, but some is there. And some scriptural references, not too many. So that's what we're going to do. Chapter 1 is, as it says, this samanya bhakti. Samanya means kind of a general gloss of the term bhakti. Very general, broad, basic, common understandings about bhakti. That's chapter 1. And then the next several chapters deal with, up to chapter 19, they deal with the 3 stages of bhakti: beginning, intermediate, advanced. But sadhana, practice, bhava bhakti, ecstasy, and prema bhakti. And that covers the first 19 chapters. But the first chapter is saying some things about all 3 of those. Samanya. Characteristics of pure devotional service. And we'll start with way in the beginning. This is Bhakti-rasamrita-sindhu. Anyavilasha Trishunyam Jnana Karma Dhyanavrtam. This verse is the principal utterance, Mahavakya, the principal verse upon which the whole text rests. So it's very important. And I could easily speak for a couple of days on this verse. So we're just going to say, because it's so important, it's so essential. But I'll just say two things about it. It says what bhakti is and what bhakti isn't. A good definition is both inclusive and exclusive. An example that comes to mind is when Prabhupada first came to America, he didn't have mridanga. At some point, one of the devotees was going to India, so Prabhupada explained to that devotee that he wanted them to bring back a mridanga. So he had to describe to him what a mridanga is. So he had to say what it was and what it wasn't. It's a drum that has two ends, not just one. But it's not the drum that you two ends like this, but two ends like this. And then it's not made of wood or metal, it's made of clay. And the two ends are of different size. One is larger, one is smaller. So like, you know, because they don't know what a mridanga is. He drew a picture. It has straps, but you say what something is and what something is, a complete definition. So bhakti has both, this is a definition of bhakti. Bhaktir-uttama. It's about not just bhakti, but bhaktir-uttama, the pure devotion, or topmost bhakti. The first part is what it isn't. It's where there's avilas, or desire, that's shunya. No other desire. Anya avilas shunya. Which desires? Speculative knowledge and fruitive activity. Jnana karma jnanavritam. Eliminate it. That's what bhakti is. Then what is it? That's what it isn't. What is it? And it's anukulyena Krishna anushilanam. It's the cultivation, anu, shilana, is cultivation. The cultivation of shil is activity that's pleasing to Krishna, favorable to Krishna. It's the purpose of the activity is Krishna's pleasure. For example, what it's not is Kamsa. Kamsa was very Krishna conscious. But it wasn't favorable. So it's not bhakti. His mind was absorbed out of fear, or Shishupal was absorbed out of animosity. He was livid. He hated Krishna. But it wasn't bhakti. So, favorable activity for the pleasure of Krishna. And even in the cultivation stage, meaning that even in the sadhana stage, even what I'm doing and what all of you are doing to different degrees, that's cultivation of. If one is following this principle, that counts as, because the topic of Nectar devotion is pure devotional service. Even in the practicing stage, because it's just like a seed. Over there's a tulsi pot. And you know, before there was the little tulsi sprouts, there was a little tulsi seed. The little tulsi seed is also a tulsi. And then when the little sprout is there, it's also a tulsi. When it gets big like this and produces more manjaris and then more seeds, it's also a tulsi. Just different stages. So even in the practicing stage, what we're doing, that's uttam bhakti, provided it follows these principles. So these are the principles how to conduct bhakti so that you reach the mature stage, the prema stage. That's what the first 19 chapters is about. And so here's the translation, hopefully, that Srila Prabhupada gives in Chaitanya Charitamrita. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, that's this anya abhilash shunyam. Knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy and fruitive action, the devotee must constantly serve Krishna and favorably replace their lamp. Okay. Then Rupa Goswami gives another reference. Don't read the translation yet. It's just Rishikesha Sevanam, where it's the senses are engaged in the service of Rishikesh, the master of the senses. And Upadi, Sarva Upadi Vinirmuktam, where you don't identify with the covering. I'm American, you're Indian, he's male, she's female, and all of those things. We don't identify with the upadi, the thing that covers the soul. We have a covering, but that's not who we are. So bhakti is relinquishing that false identification, false ego conception of self. You'll see it again. Hang on. It's in this list of what Rupa Goswami is teaching. It's part of ignorance, put it bluntly. And so this is another definition. Bhaktir uchate. It is said that bhakti is Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam, where one doesn't identify with the covering, but one identifies with the soul's position of being in service to the Supreme Person. Okay, so in this chapter 1, there's a list of 6 characteristics. That's the title of the chapter. Characteristics of pure devotional service. So there's 2 that correspond with sadhana bhakti, 2 that correspond with bhava bhakti, and 2 that correspond with prema bhakti. Nice graphic, huh? So the 2, we're going to go over these. Here comes the Sanskrit terminology. Kleshagni and Shubhada. Klesha is the easy word. It means misery. Klesha. And Kleshagni is, it eliminates kleshas. Even in the sadhana state, there's potency, even in the practicing stage, to eliminate kleshas. Shubha, da. It gives shubha. It gives auspiciousness. Beginning of all auspiciousness. Even in the sadhana stage. And then continuing on into the bhava stage, moksha, lagutakrit, that doesn't seem, there's some syllable missing. And sudurlabha. Sudurlabha, difficult to obtain. It derides even the conception of liberation. It's so elevated that who wants liberation? Bhava is, that's a characteristic of bhava bhakti. And prema bhakti, over there on the right, it attracts Krishna, and it's a it's a complete form of bliss that is incomparable to anything of this world. So we're going to see these terms again a couple of times, because that's the topic of the chapter, the 6 characteristics. There's the scriptural reference, because he's made a statement, now he's making the scriptural reference, and there it is. Characteristics of, 6 characteristics of bhakti, pure devotional service. Its ability to destroy suffering, its bestowal of auspiciousness, its disregard for liberation, its rarity of attainment, and there's the terms, moksha laguta krit. There it is. Sudurlabha. its manifestation of concentrated bliss and its ability to attract Krishna. In the prema, so these two qualities are special for the prema stage. These two qualities are special for the bhava stage, and even in the sadhana stage, these first two. So we're going to spend more time on these first two, and once we get past the first two, we'll move quickly. Buddha, or Buddhism. Those of you that are a little familiar with Buddhism probably know, according to Buddha's teaching, the root cause of suffering is desire. Solution? Become free from desire. And the destination when you become free from desire? Nirvana, or enlightenment. Well, the Vedic teachings and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Srimad Bhagavatam and Rupa Goswami is not exactly, because before there's desire in ignorance, there's ignorance. And the original ignorance is ignoring Krishna. And from that original ignorance comes all other types of ignorance. And from ignorance comes ignorant desire, and from ignorant desire comes ignorant activity, comes suffering. So here's what it looked like in Rupa Goswami's teachings. This klesha, or suffering or distress, has three causes. It starts with ignorance, and then it's the tendency for, or the desire for something, ignorant desire, and then becomes sin. And with sin comes suffering or distress. So he teaches this in this chapter. Ignorance leads to bijam. You'll see this word bijam. Bijam means seed. But material desire, so before there's the activity, there's the desire, and then comes the ignorant activity, or the sinful activity. And from the sinful activity comes the unwanted part, the distress or the suffering. So the root of it all is ignorance. And what he's teaching, Rupa Goswami is teaching, because the Bhagavatam teaches and Lord Chaitanya teaches, that bhakti has the power to remove ignorance. Bhakti turns on the light. And when the light is on, darkness is dispelled, ignorance is dispelled. So this is a list of 5 things, and I'm not going to go through the detail of it, but just understand the essence of it. This word avidya, that's the problem. There's different types of ignorance. Mistaking that which is impermanent to be permanent, that which is full of misery to be full of bliss, that which is impure to be pure, that which is not the self to be the self. Another common term that's used is maya. Literally means not this, maya, or ignorance, nescience, darkness. The material condition of life is we're covered with ignorance. Bhakti eradicates that. We'll see a little bit, not detail. And then there are different other categories of avidya, the terms you're probably familiar with: asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesh. Raga is attraction, dvesha is repulsion, abhinivesh means general absorption, an attitude of identifying the body as the basis for sense gratification, or absorption in fear of death or fear of change. Because when you're absorbed in the impermanent and it changes, then you're fearful. Abhinivesh. It's a very broad, general term. Different than raga. It's very broad. And this asmita, our dear friend, false ego. But that's a kind of ignorance too. So these are types of distress or causes of distress. And then from that comes ignorant desire and ignorant activity and so on. So I skipped the part, he gives many references from scripture that say bhakti has the power to destroy avidya. Many. And examples. So that's the first part of these 6 characteristics of pure devotional service in the sadhana stage. Now, ignorance results in a sinful desire. So we're going through it once again, and from that sinful desire comes a sinful activity, and from the sinful activity comes not yet manifested reaction to that sinful activity. And you're going to see these terms, Sanskrit terms again, prarabdha and aprarabdha. Prarabdha is, it's happening now. I stub my toe, or someone insults me, or it's too hot or too cold, or something's happening in the moment and I'm experiencing some suffering. But before the suffering manifests, there's the unmanifest stage. That's the byproduct of sin. That's the byproduct of a sinful desire. That's the byproduct of ignorance. So that's the root. Then this other phrase, kutam. These are terms that let's just say somebody has a tendency to steal. Well, we'll give an example in a moment. Rupa Goswami gives the example. Prabhupada gives the example of venereal disease. Somebody may contract venereal disease. They take a very painful treatment for the venereal disease, and then they go out and contract the venereal disease again because of this inclination. And bhakti has the power to uproot even inclination for sin because it addresses the root, the ignorance part. So a little bit on the desire, I already touched it, venereal disease. Then comes, after propensity or desire, comes the activity. We heard this. It produces, sin produces either unmanifested or manifested reaction, delayed karma or immediate karma. I think there was a Beatles song, Instant Karma. So bijam, papam, there isn't a slide for kutam, but it fits in this whole chart. There's effects. Here's the same terminology again. Aprarabdha, effect that's not yet fructified. And kutam, bijam, and prarabdha, effects which are already mature. Okay, so these are terminologies. The Sanskrit term is not so important. There's different stages, immediate and delayed, and different stages. So there's a seed, the seed that's just beginning to sprout, the seed that's just about to fructify, and then it fructifies, like that. And bhakti, Rupa Goswami teaches, with scriptural reference, is that it has the power to remove even the tendency, because it removes ignorance. The whole story of Ajamila is told based upon that. Symptoms, Rupa Goswami, well, actually Prabhupada, chronic disease, legal implications, born in a low family, uneducated and ugly. These are products of prarabdha, reactions to past sins. To support, he gives this reference from Padma Purana. For those engaged in bhakti to Vishnu, it's right there, Vishnu bhakti, ratatmanam. Step by step, the prarabdha kuta bija and prarabdha karmas are destroyed. It's right there. He's not pulling things out of air. He's just explaining something that's within the text that Lord Chaitanya also taught him. So now I think we're ready for the next of the 6 characteristics, or the second one that comes from sadhana bhakti. Shubha da, the giver of auspiciousness, Shubha. And Shubha may be thought of in terms of worldly auspiciousness. However, it gives transcendental auspiciousness, which is far more than material auspiciousness. Here's a list of 4 terms, and the terms aren't so important. So I'm going to go through it quickly. I'm going to spend a little more time on the final 2. Sadguna, development of good qualities. That's very clear, that someone who has good qualities, good character, good, refined, cultured characteristics, that's auspicious. And bhakti creates it in such a way that it doesn't come and go, but it stays. It's not circumstance generated, it's of the soul, it's on a more basic level. And sukham, happiness, that similarly is transcendental. So these first 2 terms he gives us scriptural reference for. Again, it's Padma Purana. For some reason this isn't working properly. Maybe the batteries, I don't know. Okay. Here's a verse from the Bhagavatam. I'm skipping more than half, actually, of this procedure. It's just a standard procedure. He makes statements. Where does that statement come from? Here's the scriptural reference. So I'm going through it, minimizing all these different references. But from Srimad Bhagavatam, it's a nice one. Unto one who has transcendental qualities due to friendly behavior with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all living entities offer honor, just as water automatically flows down by nature. So transcendental qualities are manifest when you engage in friendly activity in relation to the Supreme. It's something like, if you stand near fire, you get warm, because fire is warm or hot. And if you are in association with the personality of Godhead in a favorable disposition, then transcendental qualities become decorated on such a person. And then when such a person has those nice qualities, then others are appreciating, like water flows down. It's that natural. Here's a scriptural reference, again from Padma Purana, taking the very Sanskrit terms. He who worships the Lord is pleasing to all living entities, and all the inhabitants of the world, both moving and non-moving, are pleasing to him. So, based upon this Padma Purana reference, he's saying this sadhana, even in the beginning practicing stage, it helps awaken a favorable disposition towards this Supreme Person. And when that favorable disposition awakens, auspiciousness awakens within the person who is that worshipper. And then sadguna, there's a long Sanskrit phrase, but the message is, it's from the Bhagavatam, 5th canto. All good qualities become manifest within the person who has unflinching devotion for the Supreme. The second half of the verse, harava bhakta shukato mahadguna, one who is not a devotee but has only material qualifications, he simply pursues temporary material objectives based upon having those material qualifications. And there's no lasting transcendental quality to such a person. Mahadguna. Manoratena sato davato bihi. It's a very often quoted verse. It's riding on the chariot of the mind. Manorata. So keeping it simple, in the sadhana stage of bhakti, these two things, auspiciousness, this is this one, including good qualities, happiness, that's the next slide, good characteristics, and those good characteristics being pleasing and attractive to others, and having a favorable disposition to other living beings. It's just those tendencies awaken in the sadhana bhakti stage. Rupa Goswami writes that there's three kinds of happiness. There's the happiness of material activity, happiness from material enjoyment or sense gratification, happiness that comes from liberation or realization of Brahman, and then a happiness that is derived from devotional service. And he speaks a very reasonable understanding, that is, the one that is superior of the three is devotional service happiness, and the reason is it's eternal and the others aren't. And it includes and yet excels the pleasure found in the other types of happiness. Very logical. And it satisfies the soul, yenatma suprasidati, in the language of the Bhagavatam. The Atma becomes satisfied, not just the temporary body and mind. It goes directly to the satisfaction of the soul. So that auspiciousness and eradication of kleshas at the root of ignorance, that's a fruit of sadhana bhakti. And now we're going to go on to the next. Aside from material happiness, there's mystic powers, and here's the list. There's principal ones. Anima siddhi, become very small, and we're not going to go through all of them. Can become very light. Mahima, like riding on a carpet or floating in the air, or mahima, become very light. Lagima, they enter the sun planet using sunshine. Interesting. Prapti siddhi, acquiring something from a distance. Prabhupada told this story, I heard more than once. When he was young, his father was a pious person who had the habit of inviting sadhus regularly, sometimes even more than one per day, to his home. And one of the sadhus that came periodically, I guess his father gave a nice donation or something, he was a mystic, and one of his mystic powers was prapti siddhi. So he would ask the people that were gathered in the room, in the home, say something that you like. and I'll obtain it for you. So one of the persons said, I'd like a pomegranate from Afghanistan. So Prabhupada said, I was seated just right by him, and he moved his hand like this, and there was a pomegranate from Afghanistan. And I could see from the stem, it was still dripping. So it wasn't like, anyway, Prabhupada accepted that he had this capacity of Prapti Siddhi, but it's a mystic power derived from Yogeshwara, the master of mystic power. And this mystic was, accepting praise like, oh wow. So it's nothing, in Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada writes, it's nothing but manipulation of laws of nature by subtle means. It's like technology does that. How to send a signal from here to there and bounce it off of something, and you got a signal over here. That was a call from China. So, what's that? It's subtle laws of nature that are being manipulated by persons that know the laws and how to do it in a somewhat subtle way. You go to Afghanistan and get a pomegranate and bring it back, or do this one. It has to do with higher dimensional space, and it's very complicated. So, Vasita, Prakamya, and Kama Vasayata can contradict nature and do the impossible. So, Vashita Siddhi, bring anyone under control. Create a planet and destroy a planet. Those are some of the primary siddhis, and there's others. And one can derive, Prabhupada writes, one can derive great amounts of temporary happiness by achieving such yogic materialistic perfections. But Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said that advancement of such mystic perfections renders a person more foolish because it causes one to forget his real identity by its glimmer. This is doom for him because this human form of life is meant for getting out of material contamination. Anyway, so that's the first two. I think we're ready for the next two. Bhava Bhakti stage. Moksha Laguta Krita. In the Bhava stage, this is deriding even the conception of liberation. When even a little attraction for the Lord grows in the heart, the four objects of human attainment, Artha, Dharma, Kama, and Moksha, become like grass, shameful to appear before bhakti. An example, there's three quick examples. From the life of Lord Chaitanya, you probably don't know about this person, Kolavecha Sridhar. His occupation, Kolavecha, his name was Sridhar, and his occupation was, near a little cottage where he lived, there were some banana trees. And in West Bengal, there's lots of banana trees. But so he would gather the leaves of the banana trees, the flowers of the banana trees, and some bananas, and he would sit by a path by the Ganges River side, and he would sell banana leaves, banana cups, and banana flowers. And he didn't earn a lot. He had next to nothing. But half of what he earned, he used for worship of the Ganges, the other half was his little maintenance. So Lord Chaitanya came one time, long story, but short part, please ask me for anything you want. And Golavechar said, I don't want anything, I'm very happy. He said, ask me for liberation, ask anything. Don't tease me like this. I'm very satisfied. Because he was in such a state, he was in the bhava stage of bhakti, he had no attraction for any, give me this or give me that. Om Jai Jagadisha Hare. He just was happy with his life of devotion. Another example. Any person who has developed even a small amount of devotional service doesn't care a fig for any kind of happiness. Then Prabhupada gives scriptural examples on the bhava stage. As the personal attendants and maidservants of a queen, follow the queen with all respect and obeisances. Similarly, the joys of religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation follow the devotional service of the Lord. So the example is in a palace where the king resides, the queen is provided with assistants, ladies in waiting it's called. And so as she moves through the palace this way, that way, the maids are following behind her, and her focus is on the king. She's a good queen. And she's not so interested in this thing, that thing, the other thing. She's interested in the happiness of the king. So similarly, when bhava stage of bhakti is there may be facilities and resources and things that just don't have so much meaning. There may be something that somebody else is chasing after, but the person on the bhava stage, its importance just fades. So next, the second characteristic, sudurlabha, in the bhava stage is rarely attained. But this bhava stage of bhakti is rarely attained. It's difficult for two reasons. If you undertake it practicing bhakti, but there isn't an attachment to the object of devotion, the object of love, then you can't attain bhava bhakti even after doing it a long time. It requires, in the bhava stage, to mature, attachment to the person who you're serving. That's where love comes. Not just the activity, but attachment to the person. And even if there's some attachment, the bhava is something that Krishna has to award and give. And it may not be quick. I was, about 2 weeks ago, I was in Los Angeles. And one of the devotees that I know in Los Angeles, he resides in the ashram there, is a PhD graduate from Penn State University, now serving in the LA temple, looking after their museum, the first American theistic exhibit, Fate, Prabhupada gave it the name. So there were artists that made dioramas of different things. The Changing Bodies diorama, and Pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, Krishna speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. And it's all a digital, electronic thing. People go in and there's mirrors and wraparound sound and all that thing. So he takes guests through and explains everything to them. And at the end, offers them some prasadam. So he's from Iran. And it's not popular to be in America when you're from Iran. That's his citizenship. But there's lots of Iranian people in Los Angeles, so over the time that he's lived there, he's developed friendships. So when I was visiting, there was a little gathering, and they have the mantra house. So 7, 8 people from Iran got together. We had kirtan, and like we're doing here. One of the persons attending was regularly chanting, and he requested some time the next day before I left. So when we met, he said, I want to be able to open my third eye. and I'm ready to do anything. Tell me what I have to do, but I want results. Said, I'll leave my wife and my kid and my sister who I'm maintaining, and instead of chanting 4 rounds, I'll chant 64 rounds. You tell me what it is, but I want results. You know, you need to read Nectar Devotion. And I said, you know, let's start with developing the mood that I'm the servant and there's a supreme. The supreme is not my order supplier. And I know you have a big warehouse back there, and please supply and hurry up. It's not how you're going to make spiritual progress. I didn't ask him what he thought the opening of the third eye meant either. I just, his whole approach was missing some few things, like humility. So now we're almost done. We're moving on to the stage of prema, and these are terms also found in Padma Purana. But in the stage of prema, there's an incalculably thick and condensed bliss, ananda, sandrananda. It has some characteristics. Nothing can disturb it or penetrate it or move it. It's fully on the spiritual platform. There's no other thought or perception that can even momentarily register in the devotee's mind. You'd say it's beyond even samadhi or trance. It's total absorption. A very nice example of this from the Bhagavatam is in the 3rd canto, the very beginning part of that canto. Vidura is on pilgrimage, because after he was offended by Duryodhana, he went on pilgrimage. One of the places, he visited many holy places. And in the course of that long 34-year travel, he saw Uddhava in a forest in Vrindavan. And he was, wow, Uddhava, how wonderful seeing you here. And you think of Uddhava, you see Uddhava, and you think of Krishna. So yes, how is Krishna, how is Balaram, and how is this one, that one, the other one, a long list of people in Dwarka, because Uddhava was with Krishna all the time in Dwarka. And just hearing about Krishna, Uddhava lost it. Uddhava went into a trance. The Shukadeva Goswami says, he went to Krishna, although his body was right there. His thought of Krishna was so absorbed and deep and intense. His soul was with Krishna. But he is service-minded, and Uddhava is an elder, Vidura is an elder. So he struggled to come to external consciousness to do the service that Vidura had asked of him. Nice example. So, within the mind of someone on this prema stage, it's hard for anything other than their spiritual absorption to enter. They may know that it's hot or cold. I remember this nice example. During the time of, this is a Prabhupada story, during the time of the installation of the Krishna Balaram deities in Vrindavan, maybe some of you have been there, and if you haven't, someday you'll go to Vrindavan. And when you see the Krishna Balaram deity, and over here Radha Shama Sundar, they're very, very powerful, breathtaking deities. Gornitai too. But on the occasion of that installation, while there was activities, the Goswamis of Vrindavan were doing the 3-day installation, Pran Pratishtha ceremony. Prabhupada was in the back, in his room, and there was a darshan of different devotees who had gathered to spend time with him. And when the darshan was over, he stood up, and then he went from the desk where he was seated to go to his room, and somebody had spilled some water, and they didn't wipe up the water. And so his foot, barefoot, slipped on the water, because it was a marble floor, and he fell. And he fell leaning against, there was like a fireplace. It wasn't used, but he caught himself with his arm, but he twisted his ankle. And two things happened. He exhibited, as the spiritual master, some unhappiness with whoever had left the water carelessly. They should have cleaned it up. Who has done this? And everyone looking around, and no one wanted to say who had done it. Then the second thing was, because he was very capable, he knew exactly what herbs and a certain kind of a leaf, and he made his personally, had a, what do you call that? A grinding mortar and grinding pestle, and made a poultice of different herbs and applied the herbs underneath the leaf and had the leaves tied around his ankle to bring down the swelling, because it started to swell right away. And yet he was totally detached. He knew how to take care of the necessity, but he was totally detached from his body. Maybe some of you have had a toothache. There's this one other little Prabhupada story. He had a swollen jaw, abscess it's called, an infected tooth area. And the devotees were saying, Prabhupada, can we take you to a dentist? And he said, no, just give me cloves. And he put cloves in his mouth and just reduced the pain. And then a couple of days later, still like this swollen jaw thing, and he was eating. He reached in his mouth, pulled out the tooth, handed it to his servant, Harisori. He said, here, you can keep this, and went on with his meal. I mean, you know what it's like when you have a toothache. But he was not unaware of the toothache. He just wasn't absorbed in it, because his consciousness was like this. Then comparing Prema Nanda, the bliss of Prema, to Brahmananda. If Brahmananda, or the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme, is multiplied 1 trillion-fold, this is a Padma Purana verse, it still cannot compare to an atomic fraction of the happiness derived from the ocean of devotional service. So, finally, number 6 out of these 6 characteristics, it attracts Krishna. And other things don't have that same power. Prema Bhakti is so powerful that it attracts and controls even the all-attractive supreme control of Sri Krishna. This is a characteristic of Prema Bhakti. One is controlled by attachments. One becomes attached to that which gives him pleasure. Only self-satisfied people can remain detached and thus independent. The Lord is self-satisfied, but he is attracted to his own pleasure potency, Ladini Shakti, and thus becomes attached to and controlled by Ladini Shakti, Radha. So that's chapter 1. Conclusion. Even if one has a little taste for the topic of bhakti, he can understand it. He who tries to understand bhakti by dry logic cannot understand it, because logic is insubstantial. So there we are, chapter 1. And starting with chapter 2, it begins with some of the activities and characteristics of sadhana, devotional service and practice. This gives like a quick summary, or the samanya picture, general picture of bhakti, what it is and its different stages, and how the characteristics of those different stages. So I hope that's what I was supposed to do, just give a summary of chapter 1. Any thoughts on the topic? Or even off topic, I don't mind. Yeah.
Raj, in the topmost form of bhakti, it said that we can even control Krishna. So, if we are totally absorbed in his service, then why would we want to?
You don't want to.
Yes, why would we want to?
You wouldn't want to.
So,
You wouldn't want to.
it's confusing.
But it's love. In love, you don't want to control somebody.
Exactly.
So, but he's controlled by that love. The classic, one of the classics, is Mother Jasoda. Trying to bind Krishna. She can't bind Krishna. But finally she binds him with her love, not with the ropes. And Radha, she's not, I want to control my man. She's not like, she's not a manipulative lady. She's his pleasure potency. But her love is so strong that he's controlled by her love. When she exhibits anger, he's controlled by that anger. But it's rasa. It's just his own pleasure potency. It's not two entities having a quarrel.
So, are we also the pleasure potency of Krishna? So, if we like Krishna is the enjoyer and we are the enjoyed.
Yes.
So, are we a part of Radharani in that sense?
Are we part of which?
Are we a part of?
Your question is important, so say it clearly. Are we part of Radharani's potency? No.
Yes.
We're another potency. Tatastha, she's Tatastha Shakti. She's Ladini Shakti, part of the internal potency. We're marginal potency. We can be under her influence, but we're not part of her. We're Tatastha, we're marginal potency. So we want to be under her care and her guidance, her control, her influence, her mood. And she's very merciful. And that makes the heart soft, and etc. Krishna becomes attracted. Radha says, oh, this nice living entity, they want to serve you in a loving mood. Please accept them. So Krishna accepts. Yes.
We have seen the 6 qualities on which the Samanya Bhakti is being categorized.
Yes.
So in that one, how could a Samanya person, the initial devotees or initial persons like us, can measure or get the symptoms of we are grasping the Bhakti?
Well, experientially, I would take a guess that you wouldn't be continuing up to this stage if there wasn't some experience of these two things coming in the sadhana stage. Some auspiciousness is coming into life, into your life or the other's life. and in these ways that are being described. And so it's practical experience. The verification is the practical experience that good characteristics are awakening. Not like there weren't any before, but good characteristics. And then they become, once they're rooted on the platform of the soul, in connection with the Supreme Soul, they don't come and go circumstantially. And Kleshagni, similarly. It's not like, I don't have any pain in my body, and I don't get old and I won't die because I'm doing bhakti. But, the nature of suffering is rooted in ignorance, and it's not exactly, it's a dimmer switch, meaning not the off and on switch, 100% or 0, 1 or 0. It's proportionately, I'm becoming more conscious of all kinds of things, like conscious of my own impurities, and conscious of all kinds of things, by the influence of bhakti. Subjectively, I can experience that. So, maybe specifically responsive to your question, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, one can measure progress in bhakti in these two simple ways. The attraction for the temporary is subsiding. Asat trishna, absorption in the thirst for the temporary, is diminishing, at least in some areas of my life. And the attraction for the spiritual is growing in my life. And here we are, instead of wherever else we might be, and so many other students are. So some attraction, maybe not 100%, but something. And that with that something, then the light is on. And with the light on, the darkness is dispelled. And so there's something we're just not going to do, because it leads to darkness. Just not going to do. You have something? No? Okay. Yeah.
I guess I might be wrong, but I guess Kleshagni also helps us get over the fear of death.
Yeah. Well, fear in general. Fear in general. I want to say something about this. I had a fantastic time in the month of April. It was really a blissful month. I visited 19 different colleges, 18 or 19, lost track. And one of those was Texas A&M. And it was an amazing experience. It was on the Friday before Easter, Good Friday, and the university had shut down the bus system at 2 o'clock in the afternoon without sufficient warning. Still, that Friday evening, there were 60 students. And a lot of them couldn't come because the bus system was shut down. And there's a line, after the class was over, there was a line of, literally a line of people waiting to speak, and one of them was an Indian grad student, PhD. And he introduced himself by name, said, this is my situation. And I want to know how to get on the other side of fear and selfishness. And then I said, could you explain? He said, my whole life I've been driven, and it probably, matches some of you, I've been driven to compete, to do well in my academics. I've been told, you're smart, you can do it, and I bought into the picture, and I really applied myself, and I really did well the whole time. But it's all about me. And I'm realizing now that this me focus, selfishness focus, is making me very lonely and fearful. because at some point it's not going to happen. And then I'm fearful that it's not going to happen, and what are the consequences internally and externally of that. And I want to know how to get on the other side of selfishness and fear. I said, wow. Nice. So, it made an impression, so much so here, a month and a half later, I'm referring to that conversation. Significant. Because most people don't realize that they're selfish. And most people are in denial that they're fearful. But we don't know what's happening in the next moment. Not just because there's terrorists out there in the world. We don't know what's happening in the next moment. But we're so dull that we don't even think about it. But when somebody thinks about it, it's very unstable. And then when there's this song by one of our Vaishnava acharyas, it said, my position is like water on a leaf, jalatala. And the leaf moves and the water falls. My situation is very precarious. So, how to get to the position of fearlessness on the other side of fear? It's get to the position of transcendence. And that's secure. It's eternal. Doesn't matter what happens over here. This is temporary anyways. So, yes. So I know a person who, explicitly, they want to go on to the other side of fear. They want to experience fearlessness, and not just a name. So, how do you get there? What does it feel like? There's actual shelter. And the person that is offering that shelter has the power to give protection. Because I can take a false shelter in my academic prowess, this young man was saying. But it's fallible. At some point, I'll be defeated, and then I'll be sad instead of happy. I'll feel anyway. Anything else? Time for prasadam, right? Okay. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.